I'm Cheresse Thornhill-Goldson. I lead the adidas S.E.E.D program, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to A Student's Perspective, the weekly series that connects students with designers, manufacturers, educators, industry professionals, and design media celebrities to hear their stories on just how they've gotten to where they are now. Through our conversations, we connect the past, present, and future of design to show just how much we can learn from each other to grow towards our fullest potential without prescribed limitations. Think of A Student's Perspective as a weekly design lecture series from the student's point of view. A Student's Perspective is a division of the nonprofit University Hall of Innovation, whose goals are to connect students with the design industry through design challenges and mentorship, and a collaboration with the Marywood University Interior Architecture Program in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All interviews can be found in their video format at www.astudentsperspective.tv. For more information or sponsorship inquiries, please contact universityhallofinnovation@gmail.com. So hello and welcome back to another episode of A Student's Perspective. My name is Stephen Garrison, and while you might not be used to me being in front of the camera, as we get closer to the end of the semester, I decided to give my student hosts a little bit of a break as their finals and critiques and whatnot are starting to come up, and so I'm just going to jump in for today. But I'm here with Cheresse Thornhill-Goldson. All right, she is the director of the S.E.E.D program for Adidas. And yeah, Cheresse, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you maybe introduce yourself a little bit more, talk about your background, and then what is S.E.E.D?
Sure. So, like we've been sort of talking about a little bit, I lead the S.E.E.D program at Adidas. So S.E.E.D stands for School for Experiential Education and Design, and we're a university alternative pathwaying students into footwear design as a discipline. And, right now we're focused on women of color. Which is really near and dear to my heart. I'm obviously a woman of color, and I grew up in South Florida really loving sneaker design and sports and arts and crafts. I was always a kid in my family who was, painting, always either had a stack of coloring books, just always really creative. And, I know that creativity and being able to have a career in creative arts isn't something that a lot of people have access to or even aware that those careers are out there. But early on, I just been really fortunate to always have an art teacher in every part of my schooling that really helped to guide and pathway myself into this industry. So I've been in the footwear design industry now for 16 years, and I started my career off at Nike. So kind of going back a little bit, I had the opportunity to study industrial design at the high school level. So being exposed to industrial design as a high school student is really great, right? Like you get an opportunity to learn about that industry really early on. And I was just also surrounded by, other kids and creatives who were on the same trajectory with me. So it's really important to have that sense of community when you're learning something new and you're passionate about it. It's always helpful to have other creatives who are passionate about the same thing. So a lot of my friends at the high school I attended in South Florida, which is Dash Design and Architecture Senior High, a lot of my friends were studying architecture, fashion design, graphic design, film, and fine art. So being a part of that creative environment was really important for me in my formative years, really early on. And then I just always had, upperclassmen who'd gone on into our industry. They would come back and, share a lot of the projects that they were working on. Some had already interned at Nike. And so that was the light bulb moment for me to understand that, I could actually have a career in this field designing, the products that I'm really passionate about. So after high school, I attended College for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan, studied industrial design there. I think I had a chance meeting with a Nike recruiter because they would always come to Detroit for the auto show. And they stopped at, our school, did a really, amazing presentation about the brand, that we were all familiar with. And I kind of hung around, a bit later and got her business card and just stayed in touch. And at the same time, I was connected to other mentors of mine who were already at Nike and then other parts of the footwear industry. So I had really great mentors while I was in college who could help me focus in on what my portfolio should look like, what were some specific skills I should be really focusing on while in college and while pursuing that career. So much so that I was ready to put my portfolio together and apply for an internship at Nike, which I ended up applying for, and I was able to start my career there. So fast forward, now 16 years later, leading the S.E.E.D program and being able to bring all of the wealth of knowledge that I've acquired over the years into this program to help, just foster the next generation of talent coming into the brand and into our industry.
That's amazing. I think so many parts of that are.
Right.
So I've been teaching for 21 years now, and spending a lot of time teaching first-year design students and whatnot, and that exposure that you had with your high school, I think is something that not everyone gets that opportunity to have, to where you were able to kind of test out some things and figure out some things early on and just be exposed to a lot at a young age, to where it seems like you were able to kind of hone in your trajectory fairly early. Now, moving from Florida to Michigan, that's a big jump.
I saw snow for the first time. That was
Yeah,
that was a really awesome experience.
I made a similar jump, except I went in the other direction. I went from Pennsylvania down to Georgia, and so yeah, I played soccer my first year, and so I went during the summer. So we were there in the middle of August, and so yeah, that was a huge eye-opening experience to now go from that. But I think a lot of what you just touched on is a lot of what we've been trying to do, and a lot of what our purpose is of kind of exposing students to things that they can do to really start to take charge of their own education and start to become part of what their journey is going to be, as opposed to the people sitting next to them. And I think the fact that, yeah, you were able to, you took the time to hang out at the end, and you took the time to kind of talk to some of those alumni and whatnot, and kind of continue to pursue. I think that's wonderful. Now, the students that you're working with S.E.E.D. Now, S.E.E.D started in 2020, yes?
Exactly.
Okay, so
yeah.
we're 3 years in, or we will be 3 years in. And where are these students coming from? Is this a kind of a national call? Is it still fairly regional? How does it work?
It's definitely a national call. So we kicked off the program in January of 2020, just shy of the start to the pandemic. Imagine being able to start something new, relocate students to New York City, to Brooklyn, and then kick off. And then, by March, everyone's at home trying to figure out how we move forward. But our students have come from all over. Some have come from Miami. One in particular was one of the students that I taught actually when I returned, back to my own high school to teach there for a year. So she was part of our first cohort. And they've come from all over, some who have finished college, maybe, but not in a creative field. We have others who have had some college and weren't able to finish, that's often the stories of a lot of students who attempt to go to college, but just aren't able to finish for various amount of reasons. And then some have never been to college. Some are high school graduates, so it's really interesting how our cohorts come together, because they come from all different walks of life, and they get to teach each other, while they're learning from us in the program as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So how, what's the process for a student to get in? I mean, is it kind of similar to what a university setting would be? They've got to apply, they've got to they have to present a portfolio. How does that work?
Well, There are tons of barriers that are keeping students from attending college, period, much less a design or, an arts focused college. A lot of students who, like I said, maybe hadn't been exposed to art or design at the high school level may have always had an affinity for it, but they just never knew that there was even a path to be on to get into, a role or job in a creative field. So we're providing that opportunity. So, we're removing a lot of the barriers that one would face trying to go that more traditional route. So we don't require a portfolio because that's, again, something that someone would have needed to have had training in or knew that they needed to have something like that and be mentored through that process. So we've removed that as a requirement. There isn't a need for letters of recommendation or test scores or a lot of the other more traditional, checks and balances someone would need to kind of hop over to get, into a higher learning institution. So our recruitment process has been very grassroots. We actually put on creator camps. So those are, 2 to 3 hour experiences where we invite anyone who's interested in the field to come and co-create with us. And then we have an opportunity to teach them about what design is and what it means to design within an organization like adidas, how to work in teams because we're very collaborative. I also find like that's a challenge for creatives because we're so, myopic and focused on our own work that we sometimes don't necessarily appreciate or know how to collaborate with other creatives to bring one, final product to life. But that's a huge part of our process and what we do. So we really teach that in our creator camps. And then we get, the opportunity to foster community, like I said, which is a really big, important piece of learning with others and learning from others is really important. So those creator camps are ways for us to build our community, but also to recruit and for someone to kind of get an idea as to what the program would be like. And so that's how we recruit. And then next phase is application. So every July, we bring on a new cohort of up to 6 students. And so our application process and what the application actually looks like, it's fairly a low barrier to entry. So basically you're sketching a shoe or designing a shoe that doesn't exist, which is actually a really difficult thing to do if we're constantly consuming footwear and designs. But that's where we really want to see someone's, unique creativity and how they would interpret, a brief that says design a shoe that you've never seen before. And then the other piece is, tell us who you are as a creative. And that can be anything. It could be a poem. It could be a music video. It could be a piece of artwork. We want to leave it really open because we just want to be able to assess that person's level of creativity. And that's really what the application looks like, and thereafter we have our co-founder, Liz Conley, who really leads that part of the process. And we're actually going through that part of the process right now. So she's interviewing, tons of candidates, really trying to suss out and understand, their motivations for wanting to be a part of this industry, their backgrounds, if they're even ready for an opportunity like this. And then we kind of go into the next phase, which is really the finals. So we'll take, 12 participants through a 5-week evaluation process where we really get to teach them. We've seen students kind of even leave that experience with a portfolio piece. So that's really like our goal, to be able to interact with them. There are group assignments, there are weekly assignments. We help them to learn more about themselves and their own identity and how to bring that to their work. And then at the end, we choose the final cohort who we'll move forward with. And then they're with us for 2 years. So the first year is all instruction. So what makes us really unique, and I think what's really special about what we do, is our students are learning through the actual process of designing products for market. So, when you're in school or when you're in college, a lot of the projects that you may be working on are very ethereal, right? Like you're making up your own brief. You're sometimes creating your own consumer demographic or manufacturing a person. You're driving that whole process really without the real constraints and influences of a business, right? Because I think it's those types of constraints and the opportunity to problem solve through that process that really makes you a better designer and creative. But that the product you create at the end will actually really matter to a person or the person that you're creating for, and then it's right for the business. So we've put tons of products out into the marketplace. We've had lots of really great collaborations in the past. And, our students can go to any, Adidas store or Foot Locker and be able to look on the wall and see products that they've had a hand in bringing to life. And that really helps them to accelerate their learning process, because we're really doing in 2 years what institutions would do in 4. And then that's the first year. And then the second year, they start to transition from our program into our business units. So they start to have more on-the-job training, working with other teams and doing the same thing, bringing products to market, working on innovation projects. So they're really getting a hands-on learning experience that makes them, ready and primed to move into an assistant designer role at the end of the 2 years within Adidas.
Oh, that's amazing that these types of kind of high impact practices within the idea of education are. I was having this conversation just a couple of days ago with someone, because there's so much on our end as university kind of faculty and professors that it's like we have to meet certain benchmarks, and we've got to get a certain body of information out. And there's always going to be something that's missed, all right? Whether it's and every school is different in the way they teach. Whether it's they're teaching more business-like, or they're teaching more kind of design-driven, or more kind of abstract or whatnot. And so there's always going to be something that's missing from there. But that's where I think it becomes really important for these types of opportunities that are kind of tangential to some of those other kind of maybe structured learning opportunities that students should take advantage of and should kind of really start to push themselves to find those things. And yeah, I think it's great. So the field of product design or industrial design, kind of where you came from, I think it's such a broad range. And I think, so I'm teaching within interior architecture, and that's one of the things I love, is that it is such a broad kind of field over here as well. And there's so many parallels between, because industrial design, product design can go from super technical all the way to like very much craft oriented and more playful and whatnot. And I think that becomes hard for some students to figure out, okay, yeah, where do I fit within there, and how can I kind of, what end of the spectrum do I really fall under? And so during these 2 years, how, like, where do you feel that you kind of fit within there? Do they get exposed to like the more technical end of things and actual material production and qualities and those types of things, or is it kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, or is it somewhere that bounces in between?
Right. Yeah, it's somewhere in between. I really, and myself and Jessica Smith. So Jessica Smith is the co-founder of S.E.E.D along with Liz. And, what we really focused on is taking a lot of our own career experiences and building that into the curriculum for our students. And what really enables our students' growth in design is their growth in leadership. So Jessica leads on the leadership curriculum side, and we're bringing in a lot of the things that one would learn as an executive leader into the design curriculum for our students very early on, because it's that ability to know who you are, what you care about, and to stand in that with conviction, to be able to be confident when you're delivering your presentations or being confident in your design process. Being able to bring that to life is really important. And I think that's what makes them ready to move into their full-time design roles. So a lot of the work that we do very early on is focused on identity. I don't know if you've heard of the StrengthsFinders assessment, but I didn't learn about that until my 5th year in the industry. And that's really because I was a part of Affinity Group at my former employer, and I attended a leadership week. that was the first time I had an opportunity to focus on myself as a professional outside of just designing products, an opportunity to interface with other leaders within the organization and learn about their journey and how they got to where they are. I had a chance to really focus in on Strengths Finders and taking the Strengths Finders assessment and learning what my strengths were and how I can bring that to my work. So that investment in the individual as a professional before becoming a designer is so important. And then, okay, this is who I am. This is what I care about. I can bring this to the work versus seeing an archetype, right? Which is always out there. There's an archetype of the quintessential designer that we all feel like we have to pattern ourselves after. I mean, that was my college experience, right? Coming in and no, you have to sketch this way and your project should look like this and your process should look like this. There was never the opportunity for me to define that for myself in a way that made sense for me so that I can be confident just showing up as who I am. And so we start off that way with our students, and then it gives them a really great foundation to then build upon when we start to go into more of the technical things. We focus on the design process and always starting with the person you're creating for, which I think is always important. And I think sometimes it's often missed. Sometimes we jump straight into maybe the middle of the process where we just want to draw and create or be inspired by materials, et cetera. But I found throughout my own career that if you focus on the person first, if you focus on who you're creating for first, and you gain the insights, your design really does, your product designs itself, right? When you're starting from a really sound foundation so that you're not creating something that no one needs or asks for, and then you're trying to sell it into the business, which doesn't always work really well. And so we focus really, hard. We focus really hard on that process. And so that our students know that they're starting with the insight from an actual real person. We teach them how to go out and meet people and talk to consumers and what questions do you ask and understanding their motivation. So a ton of research up front. And then we transition into narratives and how do you tell stories and how do you build a story around your products that is inspired by the person you're creating for. And then how do you bring in, technology, right? What technology does a brand already have? Or if there isn't something that is in existence, how do we build it? How do we create it? How does materials play into that? Construction, those types of things, all the way up to the activation. How do we want to activate the product in the marketplace? Where do we do it? And so involving them in that whole process front to end allows them to, again, be confident in the solutions that they're bringing to life, but to also have an opinion when they're meeting with marketing or when they're meeting with development or even the other partners we work with across the organization. They're confident in their opinions because they've done all the research, to make sure that what they suggest is actually feasible and will work for the marketplace. So, yeah, that's kind of the overview.
That's outstanding. Yeah. That whole design thinking process that we employ here as well. I'm teaching a furniture design class right now, and pretty much that same process we apply every day. And my students can tell you, it's like, yeah, they're designing they've come up with their character, they've come up with their narrative, they're solving their problems, those types of things. And those are things that maybe the layperson might not consider when you're saying, okay, yeah, I'm designing a shoe or I'm designing a chair. It's like, okay, yeah, they just see that final product and they don't necessarily tie it into, okay, yeah, this is designed this way because it's going to allow this, or it's going to, like, it's a little bit higher, or it's a little bit wider, like those things. And I think with shoes and with clothing sometimes and furniture and those types of things, it's your name's not always on them. All right. When you get to a certain point, your name's on it. But then it's like, okay, when you walk through the store and you're like, yeah, I designed that shoe.
Right.
Not everybody's going to know that. And you're like, so you have got to like hold that in and be like, I designed that shoe, and somebody's going to be able to walk longer or train harder or do whatever because of the decisions that I've made. And while I try to live in the moment. I want to fast forward 10 years from now, and I want to see what these students are capable of and what happens, because what you've just described is absolutely amazing experience that I think so few people really have. And one of the things that you touched on is something that's really important to me as well, is drawing on your own experiences. And for me, I always say it's like I carry forward the things that helped me or I really responded to, and I fix the things that I didn't respond to. And that sounds like a similar process to what you guys are doing and employing and giving to your students. And I think it's just amazing. And so you're located right now in Brooklyn, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right
Can you
now.
tell us a little about a bunch of facilities and whatnot?
Sure. So we were founded within the Brooklyn Creator Farm, which, originally was a space. We would call it Designer Disneyland, a space, within the organization where designers can come and be creative. We had a maker lab and a maker space where you can go and produce your own shoes or samples of ideas that you were working on, a full wall of materials. And then also, techs who were there who really could help support bringing those ideas to life, and really was an innovation space as well. So that's where we were founded, and that's our way of working and a way in which we love to work. We're going to be transitioning our program to Los Angeles later in this year, so we're going to be there and just working again more closely with our other partners. Adidas is a huge brand, and we have our main headquarters in Germany, and then our North American headquarters in Portland, Oregon, but we also have a Los Angeles office, which we're looking forward to being able to transition there and working more closely with the designers in that space and continue to grow, our students' network and connection to the rest of the brand. But the making piece is really important. That's something we want to continue to grow for our students, and, their ability to quickly mock up ideas and things that they're working on. I think especially when you're communicating to other partners, right? Because within our organization and within footwear design, you have the design team who also partners with the marketing team and the development team. And, our partners may not always understand our sketch or our rendering or, the amount of time and work we put into, making these 2D images so beautiful. They may not understand it, and I always really challenge our students to think beyond their sketch and think beyond the rendering. And it's maybe not worth spending 3 hours on a rendering, rather, using that time efficiently, bringing your 2D concepts to a place where they're developed enough to be able to communicate through, but then reserving that time to make, right, or mock up something in 3D, even if it's taping up as an existing shoe, just drawing, your design lines on that shoe. So it's something that can be turned around. I had a really great mentor, Dwayne Edwards. He used to wrap all of his shoes in masking tape, draw his designs on there, and actually paint it so that it looked, really realistic, like the shoe that he wanted to bring to life. And that was just a great tool to communicate with our marketing partners or our development partners, or even sending something like that to Asia as a communication tool, because that's really what the sketches are, right? I think sometimes we make sketching and modeling, we make some of those things bigger than they actually are. We don't understand that it's a communication tool until you get a sample, until you get a real shoe, and no one cares about your sketch, right? And I always tell our students too, we're not putting sketches up on the wall at Foot Locker, right? Like, we're putting real shoes up. So just to try to, I think there's a lot of anxiety around sketching or doing, making a beautiful sketch. And I think a lot of people, I think if you're new to the industry, you get really wrapped up on that because you see a lot of those beautiful sketches and renderings on Instagram or websites, and you think that's the end all be all. You're holding yourself to that standard and you're putting that pressure on yourself. But I've seen it a million times where maybe it's spent way too much time on something like that and no one really even cared about it outside of design. as you go on into, the rest of the design process with your partners, they want to know, how is it going to be manufactured? They want to know the costs, right? Can we produce this at the cost we need to produce it at, so that we can, fulfill our revenue obligations to the organization? Like, those are the things that are really important. So, for our team, I try to expose them to the other parts of the business so they can understand how being a great design teammate for your other functional counterparts and what that looks like to help them reach their goals, because we should all be co-owning bringing this product to market at cost so that it works and it's adopted, by the business, and it makes its way out. So I try to expose them to the other parts of the business so that we don't get wrapped up in our own little design world where we're only speaking to ourselves, but we're understanding the other parts of the business and what's important to them so that we can deliver against those.
Yeah, and I think that's again a great way to create a holistic kind of approach and a well-rounded designer and design student and whatnot, because it's right. You can talk to someone who knows exactly what you're doing, and you can show them a thing and they're going to understand it one way. But then when you have to talk to the person that maybe is in charge of saying, okay, yeah, this is what it's going to be, or here's the money for it, and they don't care some of what you've just. I think so.
Knowing your audience is important.
I tend to make the correlation between like runway fashion and ready to wear, where it's like, okay, yeah, you've made this avant-garde sketch and it looks really great, but a foot wouldn't actually fit in there in that the right way and whatnot. So there's so much other kind of consideration that needs to go in there. And I think the respect for precedent. I mean, the idea that design can't come from a vacuum, and there has to be a look at the things that have worked before, and you're not reinventing the wheel every single time you do something. And students tend to want to do that. They want to make the thing that no one else has ever seen. And like making that slight change is often better than making a whole change. You know what I mean? And I think that takes a little while to get through to some students and let them figure out. It's like, okay, if someone tells you that something isn't quite working, it's not a critique of you as a person. It's a critique of your design, and they're coming from their history of why it might not be working. And it could be, we've tried to do this, but it doesn't fit right into a box. It could be a million different things. And so it's that level of expectation and what failure really is. And I again, I'll bring back my students. It's like the only time you're actually failing is if you stop trying. And so as long as you're taking that feedback and you're saying, okay, what were they actually saying, and why wouldn't this quite work, and how much do I need to change, and kind of where it goes. So I think this sounds like an amazing program, and I, of course, want to do it now, but I'm a little bit busy too. So. So you are your first group. So that inaugural group is finishing up, or have they finished?
Already done. Yeah. So they started in 2020 in January, and they ended at the end of 2021. So they're already off into their full-time roles. We have Gen 2 who started with us, and they're halfway through the program. Gen 3 started with us last summer. So they're in flight as well, and Gen 4 will start with us in July. But I want to go back to the point that you made around, not fully understanding maybe the goal of the project and trying to reinvent the wheel every time. And I think it's a hard jump to make. I think for a lot of designers who have started off as artists, like, as an artist, right, you're trying to create like this quintessential piece, but that isn't necessarily what design is. And I think that's been like the hardest transition, even for myself, to start off as a fine artist and then to transition into becoming a designer. What really helped me is just understanding that design is truly a service. I'm providing a service to a person. So it isn't about me. It isn't about designing something I would wear or I want to see on my feet. It's about using this process and my skill to be of service to an individual who has a need. So how can I serve them best is now the goal, which I also, really implore to our students as well, because they struggle with wanting to design something they really want to wear because they want to wear this product. But I always say you're not always a consumer, right? So to be focused on using this skill as a service to service someone else who has a need that you're able to solve. So,
and that's a super difficult thing. So in our kind of area as well, so architecture, interior architecture, whatnot, of being able to empathize enough at the beginning of that design process, the design thinking process, but then to be able to make that separation to where you know that, okay, maybe you're designing for a purpose or a person that you're not familiar with, and that isn't you. And so you can solve a problem for yourself and cause a problem for the user or for the next person. And so, yeah, trying to figure out where that boundary is and when you can let go of your own part of it, when you can accept and bring in for someone else. And I tell students all the time, it's like, okay, you're going to get to a point where you might not like your design anymore, but
right.
You've got to say, okay, is that important? Like,
right.
if it's serving its purpose, if it's successful in what it does it matter that it's like, okay, yeah, I wouldn't have that, or I wouldn't do this. It's like, yeah, you've got to figure out where that boundary lives. And that's one of the I think the most difficult things with kind of a like you're saying, a service kind of industry like this is, yeah, how do you teach someone to be able to make that delineation? And I'm sure there are people that exist more so on either side, where it's like, okay, I'm only doing it for someone else, or I'm not really considering how it would work for me or whatnot. And yeah, and so there's no perfect thing there, but I think just trying to straddle those worlds, I think is really it's really important. And I think that so the S.E.E.D program, the ages they range, yes, so they're
Sure.
like just out of high school up to kind of
up to 99.
Yeah.
We don't have an age, limit.
Yeah. And do you do anything with, or have you thought of doing anything with younger students as well? Like, do you do any outreach with high schools and those types of things? Because I know for me, so I went to art school, and the only reason I was able to go to art school was because I had a great high school teacher. All right, and I didn't go to an arts and design high school. I was the only one, and I was lucky enough to have that teacher who was able to push me and kind of help me to find those kind of where I needed to be. But not everybody has that experience. And to be able to for a 17, 18-year-old student to be able to say, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I think jumping into an art or design degree or a degree track can be really daunting to everyone else. To parents, to guidance counselors, to everything else. And I think the more exposure that we can give to students younger on who are in these standardized test models of things of like going for that one right answer, I think if we can give them a little bit more kind of exposure to what the potentials and possibilities are of something like this, I think is going to, again, kind of help everyone to grow. So do you guys do any outreach like that?
We do. And we have a lot of our students who have come from, schools that didn't have an art program. So they often go back and try to foster those relationships. I mentioned my mentor, Dwayne Edwards, who started Pencil Forward Design Academy in Portland, which is now grown into Pencil Lewis College. So he does a lot at the high school level in partnerships with different brands. And so we also try to partner with him in that way to further, grow our reach. But we do have aspirations in the future to just create more links to different high schools. I would love to have a network of high schools that we're working with in terms of sharing knowledge, because I always believe it should be free. It's pretty tough for me to wrap my mind around, someone having to pay or, being this exorbitant amount of debt just to learn, So I'm constantly just sharing information. But yeah, definitely wanting to connect more with high schools who don't have design programs so that the students are exposed, that to jobs like this and to know that it exists.
No, that's great. So you mentioned Pencil Lewis, and I've been following them for a while, and there's seems to be a kind of recent resurgence or even just a growth in the idea of footwear design at a university level. I mean, recently I've seen, so my own alma mater, so S.E.E.D, now has a sneaker design minor. I was consulting with a colleague of mine in the UK who was looking at developing an athletic shoe degree track at her university and these things. And so it's a niche that I don't think I had seen it for a while, and then all of a sudden it seems to kind of be bubbling up. Is that something you've noticed or been following? I mean, you're more directly tied to it, obviously. So, yeah.
I think there's more of an awareness of the footwear industry itself, and the fact that, we're approaching being $100 billion industry, and there's tons of opportunities. And I think even within footwear design, there's a lot of design opportunities. So there are color designers, whoever thought that you can make a living applying color, to shoes or materials and developing materials. There are material designers who work on footwear. There are graphic designers who apply graphics to footwear, and that's your whole job. So there's so many avenues. That's really why I love this industry as well, because there's a place for everyone to be a part of it. And when I was attending college and wanting to study footwear design, it wasn't seen as, a viable direction to follow. Transportation design was the holy grail, right? So, a lot of the students who were, in the program I was in, they wanted to be transportation designers, and product design was almost like the stepsister, right, of the transportation designers. And then the footwear designers were almost like the outcasts in a way. It wasn't, I think footwear design within the product design world was seen as fashion. It wasn't seen as, being technical or, a product type that could sit in product design. It seemed like it was fashion, but there's so much technology, in footwear that I think people aren't maybe aware of. And that's why I was being lumped in, with fashion design. But I think many of us have gone through the industrial design pathway, and we've landed in footwear design, and it's growing. And I think the more that we talk about it and the more we share our paths, there's more of a desire and a demand, for footwear design as a discipline at the, college and university level, which is why I think organizations and schools are now implementing this, because kids want it. I mean, there's this whole sneakerhead subculture, that exists. That's huge, and a lot of people want to study the disciplines. So I think that's why you're probably seeing it now. And then also social media has changed everything as well. When I was in college, Facebook was just getting started. And I think when Instagram came along and the sharing of that information and being able to tell the story behind the shoe and how you even got to becoming a footwear designer, I think that's now prompting a lot of institutions to say, oh, kids actually want to study this. Maybe we should create an opportunity and a path. And, even my college, who, really frowned upon sneaker design, now has an accessories, degree program focused on footwear design. They have a whole, footwear studio, and they've hired on, a footwear designer to lead that. So it's, I think social media has really expanded and shed a light on our industry, but it's always been here. I think now, there's just an awareness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So talking about all that, talking about where we are right now, you're going to be moving to Los Angeles. What do you see, or what would you want for the future of S.E.E.D? Do you see it changing? Do you see it growing? Like where do you see it in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think, we started off with footwear design because that was the greatest need. And if we had looked at our industry across the major brands, we had less than 10 women of color operating as footwear designers, across the major brands. And I was one of them. So, now that we've started, S.E.E.D is now doubling those numbers every year. But there's tons of opportunities and there's needs in other areas of our business too, product marketing, development, engineering. There's so many other parts of product creation that people just don't know about, don't have access to, they don't know what that path would look like. So I think that's a real opportunity for us to expand into those other areas as well.
Excellent, excellent. And have you? I think I've seen you've been able to partner with a few outside people and influencers and things over the past couple of years. And how has that helped again to just kind of spread everything? I mean, Adidas is not not an unknown brand, obviously, but anytime you can have some of those pairings and bring in people from other walks of life and whatnot, I think it just kind of continues to spread that outreach. So how have those sorts of things developed?
That's really been an unlock for us. And I think it goes back to what I said before in terms of, artists and designers and creatives, I think the idea of collaboration is a new idea for us because I think a lot of times we're talking to ourselves. We're somewhat in our own bubble. And I think, S.E.E.D as being part of a bigger brand, we have a really amazing partnerships team they're really invested in our students' growth and success. And they've been part of championing partnerships for us. So, partnering with Ruth Carter to work on some of the costumes for Wakanda Forever and partnering with Lexus to also bring that story to life on a vehicle. We're starting to expand and design other types of products, which just makes our designers, better footwear designers as well. I think that's always been the thing. If I can go back and change anything from my own journey, and I probably am eating a little bit of crow now because this is something that that a lot of my professors really tried to impart to me at the time is not to be so laser focused in one discipline. You can have your home discipline, but allow yourself to be influenced by other disciplines to be able to bring different points of view to your own work. If you're constantly only creating the same thing or the same product type and so for footwear designers, right? If you're only designing footwear, if you're only consuming footwear, if you're not exploring other industries and learning from other industries, you can get stale. You may not be bringing something new. And so what partnerships has done for us is to expand the aperture of our students. They know that they're on the track to become footwear designers, but if they're designing a backpack, it's going to make them understand those functional elements in a new way, or a different consumer in a new way. Or if they're designing a car interior, if they're expanding, they are allowing themselves to try out that design process on different types of products, and they are going to learn something from a manufacturing process, in a different product that allows them to bring that back to footwear. So that's what partnerships has done for us. It's expanded their aperture. It's allowed them to try their hand at different things and just to be a more well-rounded creative and to form opinions about different types of products versus just being so, myopic and focused in on one.
Yeah, that's such an important thing, and to get students to kind of go past their blinders. Right. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do through the webcast and through all the other programming that we do with the nonprofit. But is just to let people know that it's like, yeah, whatever your degree says, whatever your training says, it's not a limit. It's a start. You know what I mean? Like you said. So my background, I was trained as a painter, and I've been teaching for 15, 20 years in interior architecture and whatnot. And it's like, I wouldn't have said this is where you'd find me like back when I was in school, but this is where I've kind of come to, because I mean, all design comes from the same basic principles, and I think it's really what you're open to and what you're willing to try to explore. And I think, I think this is an absolutely beautiful kind of story, and I'm glad that we were able to share. And yeah, I just want to thank you. And so you stole my thunder a little bit, because our final question is normally, if you could go back and talk to your student self, what is one piece of advice that you might offer? But you've given yourself a little bit of advice, but is there anything else that you might?
Tons.
Okay.
I have a laundry list.
Yeah, you didn't steal anything.
It's hard to choose. It's hard to choose what I would go back and talk to myself about. But I think I would have challenged myself more to dream bigger than I was dreaming at the time. And it was a different day, and I wasn't exposed. Like I said, when I was in high school, I had a flip phone, and I finally got it when I was in the 11th grade. So there wasn't a platform for exposure. And I think now students are, my 12-year-old goddaughters have iPhones, so there's a lot more exposure. And it's a different world today, but I think I would have told myself to dream bigger. Nike's a great place to start, but that won't be your end. Allow yourself to create white space, right? I was someone who had my whole life planned out. I thought I knew where I would go to school. I knew, when I wanted to be at this point in my career. I had my life really kind of planned out, and it's turned out somewhat as I planned, but in a lot of ways not, which I'm really happy about. It's been better than I could have imagined it would be. But I would have wanted to expose myself to more things, to see myself as not just someone designing the products, but as someone who could create an organization or to create a business or something to that effect, where the product was just a part of that, or a means to an end, not the end. And that's something that I'm even just learning now, how to look past the product and understand how the product fits into a bigger ecosystem. The product isn't the end, right? The product is a way to bring about an end result that we're desiring for a person.
Yeah.
And it can happen in multiple ways. It could be a product, or it could be a service, or it could be a site, or it could be something else, but it isn't always this tangible product as being the solution for this thing. So I think, just dreaming bigger and being more open would be something that I would have told myself.
Yeah, those are definitely good advice that everyone, I think, should keep in mind. And one of the things I just took from what you said, I think it's not only applicable to younger students, I think to people at any point of your career, is we are constantly, if we're doing it right, we are constantly learning and constantly have that opportunity to evolve. I think once you're stagnant in saying, okay, I've reached this point and this is what I'm doing, it's okay, now what? It's like, where else can you go? How can you progress this? Where can you take it? And then what might happen? I think it's very easy to find those levels of success where you're just like, okay, now I'm here, now I'm comfortable. It's like, I think, you've got to push yourself to become uncomfortable again, and then become comfortable, and then kind of keep on that whole cycle of things. And so I think everybody can take from that advice and move forward. So I think I really appreciate this time, and so I just want to thank you, Cheresse, for taking the time to join us.
For having me.
Yeah, I think that this conversation is going to resonate with people kind of at all walks of life and all kind of stages in their careers. And so everyone else, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, follow, and subscribe across all of our platforms. So we've got the web, we've got podcasts, we've got everything out there. And make sure to tune in next week as the conversation continues from a student's perspective. We hope you liked this discussion with the design industry from a student's perspective. Please like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations to come.